Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. For those of you who are watching me for the very first time, my name is James Ambroise, and on this channel we cover how to pay off debt faster than any other debt repayment method out there. We cover basic bookkeeping and accounting for someone who just started out a small business. We cover basic personal income tax to include a Schedule C, Schedule E, depreciation. I am also the author creator of Ambroise Method 1.0 and Ambroise Method 2.0. Ambroise Method is a revolutionary debt repayment method that offers greater results in terms of reducing interest cost compared to debt snowball, debt avalanche, velocity banking. Real quick about my credentials: I have been or am a bookkeeper and accountant, QuickBooks Pro advisor, senior tax advisor, residential real estate investor, residential property manager, financial coach. And as always, before we get started with what's on the board, please allow me to shout out the name Jesus, my Lord, my God, my Creator. Thank you. All right, America, on the board we have this hypothetical scenario of somebody who filled out one of my Microsoft Excel worksheets, and the person provided me with these figures. For debt, this person has a Navy Federal credit card, Regions home equity line of credit, and an Avant personal loan. Okay. Original loan amount, the credit limit, 15,200. The APR, 18%. Balance owed, 14,400. Monthly payments charged, $358.68. Availability, remember I worked out from prior lesson that the availability is the relationship between the credit limit and the balance owed. That relationship calls for a subtraction operation. 15,200 minus 14,400. That's how we arrive at $800, not taking into account the monthly payments charged. Okay, which means that this $800 is actually less. Okay, 800 minus 35868. Okay. Credit utilization. Credit utilization is the relationship between the balance owed and the credit limit. That relationship calls for a division operation. 14,400 divided by 15,200. That's how we arrive at 94.74%. Okay. Payment rates charged. Payment rates charged is the relationship between the monthly payments charged and the balance owed. That relationship calls for a division operation. $358.68 divided by 14,400. That's how we arrive at 2.49%. Now, on the Navy Federal credit card, the statement date or the statement closing date is on the 3rd of current month. Okay? And Navy Federal is charging 1% plus interest. So that's how they arrive at the monthly payments charge. Okay? So it's 1% plus interest. Okay? On the Regions ELOC, the statement date or the statement closing date on Regions ELOC was on the 23rd of prior month. So 23rd of the month prior. Okay? And for monthly payments charge, Regions ELOC is charging 1/360th of the outstanding balance. We're assuming the outstanding balance is 9,700 plus interest. That's how they arrive at this 90.94. Okay. Now for this Avant personal loan, the statement date or the statement closing date was on the 1st of the month. Okay, 1st of current month. And it is a 60-month term. So this personal loan is a 5-year term or 60 months. Okay. Now we're doing a scenario for single dad. His income is on a bi-weekly pay period, so you get paid on the 7th, and the next paycheck will come 14 days later on the 21st. And the total take-home pay, so his net income after tax, America, is $5,400.05. Okay, his debt $39,195.57. The debt, America, that's when you add all these balances that we have on the board, every single one of them. 14,400 plus 9,700 plus $15,095.57. That's how we arrive at $39,195.57. Now these expenses, $5,000.05. Now out of these expenses, America, $2,686 could go on a credit card. Okay? These are the expenses that could go on a credit card. Electricity could go on a credit card, water, YouTube TV, Netflix, T-Mobile, groceries, fuel, gas for a vehicle, restaurant, car insurance, property tax, property insurance, and car insurance. Those two combined, $298. Yes, okay. All these could go on a credit card, and when you add them up, the total, America, is $2,686.86. Okay. Now his cash flow, $400. America, remember from prior lesson that cash flow is the relationship between the income and the expense. That relationship calls for a subtraction operation, $5,400.05 minus $5,000.05. That's how we arrive at $400 in cash flow. Okay. All right, today we're doing case study number 21, and today's date is August 27, 2025. Okay, that is the day that I'm doing the video. All right, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to start with the exercise. All right, America. Today, I'm going to introduce to you guys one new terminology. And the new terminology is decoupling. Decoupling. A minimum payment. Or decoupling a regular payment. All right, folks. Now, there goes the regular payment or the minimum payment. Navy Federal, the minimum payment, $358.68. Regents ELOC, the regular payment, $90.94. Avant personal loan, the regular payment, $1,264.43. Now, decoupling a minimum payment or decoupling a regular payment is to separate the payment. Most of these payments, America, they are made up of at least principal and interest. Sometimes you might have some late fees and some other items, but mostly principal and interest. So at least principal and interest. So when we are decoupling a minimum payment or decoupling a regular payment, we're trying to separate at least the principal and interest portion. Okay? So we're gonna decouple the payment for Navy Federal. We're gonna decouple the payment for Regents ELOC, and we're going to decouple the payment for Avant personal loan. Okay? So we're gonna at least try to figure out how much goes to principal and how much goes to interest. Okay? So principal interest. All right, folks. Now, Navy Federal, the monthly payment charge or the minimum payment is $358.68. $358.68. Regions ELOC, the monthly payment charge or the regular payment is $90.94. So $90.94. And Avant personal loan, the monthly payment or the regular payment is $1,264.43. $1,264.43. And again, folks, we're going to try to separate the principal and the interest portion of that payment. So we are decoupling the payment. Okay? Now, on the Navy Federal credit card, for monthly payment, they're charging 1% plus interest. Okay? So now, $1 of the balance or 1% of the outstanding balance plus interest. We're assuming the outstanding balance $14,400. So what's 1% of that? So it'll be 14,000. That on the Navy Federal now. So 14,400 times 1%. Okay. 14,400 looks like 144, but let's just run it times 1%. So we are $144. So for Navy Federal, the principal portion will be 144. So the interest payment portion gonna be the difference, because remember altogether we are at $358.68. So it will be $358.68 minus 144, which means that the interest payment portion is $214.68. Okay? That is decoupling the payment on the Navy Federal. We're trying to separate, or we're trying to figure out how much is for principal and how much is for interest. Okay. Now we're gonna decouple the payment on the Regions ELOC. So we're gonna do the same thing, but for Regions ELOC, they are charging 1/360th plus interest. So for Regions ELOC, 1/360th of the balance or the outstanding balance. We're assuming the outstanding balance is 9,700. So what's 1/360 of that? So that's 9,700 times 1 divided by 360. Okay. So 97 divided by 360. So we are at $26.94. Okay, that's the principal payment portion. And again, Region is charging 1/360th plus interest. So interest is interest. So this 1/360th represents the principal. Same thing with the Navy Federal, 1% plus interest. So interest is interest. So this 1% represents principal. Okay, folks? So now we are at $26.94 on the Regions ELOC. $26.94. So which means that the interest payment portion, remember total, it is $90.94. So $90.94 minus $26.94. $26.94. So the interest payment portion will be $64. Okay. Same thing on the Avant personal loan. Avant is charging 18%. Okay? I'm sorry, 35.99%. So the original loan amount was 35,000. When you do 35,000 at 35.99% over 60-month terms, so we are at $1,264.43. But let me run my numbers one more time, making sure I did not make a mistake from before. So the original loan amount was 35 grand, 35,000. Long term, 60 months or 5 years. And the interest was $35.99. $35.99. Okay, so 126443. 126443. Perfect. Now, that's the monthly payment charge or the regular monthly payment. And again, we're trying to decouple that payment. Okay, so we're trying to at least figure out how much goes to principal and how much goes to interest. Okay. Now, most of the personal loan, they use a simple formula on how they arrive at the interest cost for the cycle. So if we are at 1264.43, remember the balance now is $15,095.57. So for Avant, $15,095.57 times, remember they're charging 35.99%, okay, on the remaining balance. Okay, it used to be 35 at some point, now it's only 15. So how much interest, okay, it will be on 15,000. Okay, so 15,000 on the remaining balance, which is $15,095.57 times 35.99% divided by 12. Okay, all right, folks. So we have 15095.57 times 35.99% divided by 12. So we are at the interest payment portion will be, this time it's the interest. Okay, the first two were the principal first. Now we're trying to get to the interest first now. So we are at full 52.74. Okay, but total the payment 1,264.43. So 1264.43 minus 452.74. Okay, so now the principal payment portion now on Avant personal loan is $111.69. Okay. Again, folks, we are decoupling a minimum payment, or we are decoupling a regular payment. Decoupling a payment, it is to separate the principal and the interest, at least the principal and the interest, or to try to identify how much goes to principal and how much goes to interest. Okay, that is decoupling a payment. Now, so for Navy Federal, the principal payment portion $144, the interest payment portion $214.68. For Regents ELOC, the principal payment portion $26.94, the interest payment portion $64. For Avant personal loan, the principal payment portion $811.69, the interest payment portion $452.74. Now, why do I want to go through this exercise? America, in this particular example, the regular payments or the minimum payment on those accounts, they all have principal and interest. Navy Federal has principal and interest payment portion. Regions, principal and interest. Avant, principal and interest. So, when you are paying off debt, America, which means that you've been sending principal, at least principal payment to all these accounts. So we got 3 accounts on the board. On the Navy Federal, you are sending principal payment to the Navy. On the Regents ELOC, you are sending principal payment to the Regents ELOC. On Avant Personal Loan, you are sending principal payment to Avant Personal Loan. Okay? America, you cannot be sending principal payment to every single debt, to every single trade line, when you could help it. Okay? And again, folks, I just broke it down. I just decoupled those payments. You could clearly see that you are sending principal payment to all your traditional trade lines. Your traditional trade lines, America, these are the accounts that gets reported to your credit report, to the credit bureaus. Okay? Like Navy Federal get reported on your credit report. Regents ELA gets reported. Avant Personal Loan gets reported on your credit report. Okay, these are your traditional trade lines. Okay, and again, you are sending principal to all these accounts. America, that is not an efficient way to pay off debt. Okay, if you could help it. Now, there are times when you cannot do anything about it, even though you know that you're sending principal to every single debt. Okay. Sometimes you can't do anything about it, but there are times, like in this example, where you could absolutely, America, do something about it. And we're going to get to that a little later in the lesson. Because you cannot be sending principal payment to all these accounts. One account has to have priority. Well, let's take a look at the APR. Avant Personal Loan, 35.99%. This APR is quite high. Regents ELOC, it's only 8%. Navy Federal Credit Card, 18%. So if you have the options, America, to send principal payment to these accounts, sorry about that. So if you have the options to send principal payment to these accounts, or to one of these accounts, it would be the Avant Personal Loan. Okay? Because you would get more bang for your bucks. Avant is charging 35.99% for each dollar borrowed, America. The reverse, America, is also true. For each payment made, for each principal payment made, you're going to also be saving 35.99%. Because that's the highest one that we have on the board. Okay? Navy Federal is the next highest one, but it's only at 18%. Okay? This one is 35.99. All right, America? Remember, your traditional trade lines, America, they are always in competition with themselves. They are in competition with one another. So, Avant Personal Loan is in competition with Regents ELOC. Avant Personal Loan is in competition with Navy Federal. Navy Federal is in competition with Regents ELOC. Navy Federal is in competition with Avant Personal Loan. Regents ELOC is in competition with Navy Federal. Regents ELOC is in competition with Avant Personal Loan. To see which account gets to receive what. Okay? But in terms of principal payment, Avant has priority because again the APR on Avant is considerably higher than the APR on the other accounts. Alright, America, I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. Alright, America. Now that we broke it down, and we're going to get to that a little later. And again, folks, if you have the options to send principal, you much rather send all these principal payment towards the account that has priority. Avant personal loan has priority over these other accounts because the APR on Avant is considerably higher than the APR on these other debts. Okay? Because remember, America, when you're paying off debt, the standard, the barometer, the measuring stick is to attack the higher APR account, which is Avant personal loan in this example. Okay? That is the standard. Alright, folks? Now, we're going to get more. I'm going to leave that on the board because we're going to get to that a little later in the lesson. Okay. Now, remember, America, that Ambroise Method calls for a series of steps. And those steps have to be taken at least once a month. And the steps, for those of you who missed that lesson: segregate, compare, transfer, repeat, cash flow large payment, and we have to insert the what? WHT. W, which account or accounts to use. H, how much of a payment to send to these accounts. And T, to pay down or off which debt. These are the steps, America, for Ambroise Method, and those steps have to be taken at least once a month. Now let's segregate. The way we segregate, America, we segregate by same account types. Taking a look at the list of debt, and I prefer my revolving credit account on top and my installment credit account at the bottom. Navy Federal, that's a credit card, so that's revolving credit account. Regents ELOC, that's not a credit card, that's revolving, that is in a draw period. For our purpose, it is a revolving credit account. So we have our two revolving on top. Avant personal loan is an installment credit account, it's at the bottom by itself. So that's how we segregate. To save time, I've already rearranged the list. I have my revolvings on top, my installment at the bottom. Okay? So next, America, we compare. The way we compare by APR between different account types. Remember, we have two revolving, one installment. Between the two revolving, I prefer the higher APR on top. So 18 is higher or bigger than 8. So 18 is listed first. Avant 35, that's a different kind, so it's at the bottom by itself. Okay? So to save time, again, I've already rearranged the list, so my list is perfect. Next, America, we transfer. The way we transfer, we typically try to relocate balance from an account that has a higher APR. So Avant has that higher APR, $35.99. We're trying to relocate that balance, $15,095.57. And we're going to try to dump it into lower APR accounts. Since we have multiple accounts in America with lower APR, so we're going to go from absolute highest to absolute lowest. So I'm trying to dump 15,000. Sum of that 15,000, $95.57. We're going to try to dump it onto the region's ELOC. But when we take a look at the region's ELOC, America, the original loan amount, 10,000. Balance owed, 9,700. Availability is $300, not taking into account this monthly payment charge. So the availability is even a lot less than $300. Okay? So credit utilization, 97%. We're already in the 90s, so we have to be a little careful. Okay? So we are too close, America, to the credit limit or the original loan amount. 10,000, 9,700 is owed. Too close to the credit limit. Again, we're already in the 90s, 97%. Okay? So for that reason, we cannot do any transfer with these regions. So now we're going to go from absolute highest APR to the next lowest APR. Well, the next lowest APR now is Navy Federal credit card, because region is a no-go. Okay? So when we take a look at the regions, availability, $800, not taking into account this $358.68. Okay? Credit limit, 15,200. Balance owed, 14,400. Credit utilization, 94%, 94.74%. So we're already in the 90s, America. So we have to be a little careful. Okay? Because we are too close to saturation point. We are too close to 100%. Okay? In this example, we could do a little transfer, but the number will be so small, we're not even going to worry about it. So because we are too close to saturation point, okay, we're not going to execute any balance transfers. Okay? So going back to the steps, transfer, we're not able to do any transfer between these accounts because we are too close to saturation point or too close to 100%. So the next item now, the next steps now is to repeat the transfer. Well, we did not do any transfer to begin with, so we cannot repeat any transfer. Okay? So now, America, we are done with all of the items that are above the line. There goes the line. So now we have to go downstairs. We have to go below the line. And below the line, we have to ask some questions. Can we use cash flow or can we make a large payment? Let's take care of the large payment first. Single dad during this period did not receive any income tax refund. Single dad during this period did not receive any bonus checks from work. Because remember, he's on a bi-weekly pay period. Single dad did not receive any additional funds or money that would constitute or represent a large payment. So we do not have any large payment. So which means now we're going to be dealing with cash flow. So now, America, let's figure out how much our new cash flow is. Remember, the original cash flow was $400. Our new cash flow is still going to be $400. Why? Because nothing's changes. We did not do any transaction at all. We did not do any transfer. We did not repeat the transfer. Okay? So our cash flow will stay the same, $400. Okay? Now going back to the steps, we're done with cash flow. The next steps is which account or accounts to use. Okay? America, on our method, Ambroise Method, we have two different type of users. We have what we refer to as a normal user. Or basic user. We have what we refer to as an advanced user. Again, folks, on our method, Ambroise method, we have two different type of users. Okay? By the way, America, which debt repayment method do you know gives you so many options? Two different type of users on our method. Normal user, advanced user. Does that snowball give you that many options? No. Does that avalanche give you that many options? No. Does velocity banking gives you that many options? No. Okay? We are truly a revolutionary debt repayment method, America. Okay? We're giving you a lot of options. Okay? Now, when you're paying off debt, America, you're going to come across three main elements, three main assignments, three main jobs. These are just the main ones. There are more, but these are the main elements, the main assignment, the main jobs. It'll be T for transfer, A for alternative account, and C for cash flow. Okay? That's our tack on our method, TAC. T for transfer, A for alternative account, C for cash flow. Okay? Now, if you fall under a normal user category, normal user takes advantage of transfer, takes advantage of cash flow. A normal user on our method, America, does not take advantage of the alternative account. Why? Because A, this alternative account is a very dangerous account if you don't know what you're doing. Okay? So, for those of you who are still learning about this alternative account, well, be Ambroise Method normal user. Okay? You're still going to do better than that snowball as a normal user. You're still going to do better than that avalanche as a normal user. And you might do better than velocity banking as a normal user. Okay? Now, we have another user, like our aforementioned, advanced user. An advanced user, on the other hand, takes advantage of every single item that we have on the board. An advanced user takes advantage of transfer. An advanced user takes advantage of the alternative account. An advanced user takes advantage of cash flow. Okay? An advanced user, you're going to do better than all these other guys. That snowball, that avalanche, velocity banking. Okay? For sure. Alright, America? Now we're doing a scenario for an advanced user. For an advanced user, America, we're always trying to identify three main accounts. The first one will be the first in line account. First in line, or the account for greater results. In terms of reducing interest cost. For an advanced user, the next account we're trying to identify is the next in line account, or the account for greater liquidity. And finally, America, our third and final account, we're always trying to identify the alternative account. For movements of income and movement of expenses. Okay. This movement, America, all it means is that income comes in, like our competitor like to say, and expenses goes out. Okay, that's all. Okay. Now let's try to figure out our account. First in line account, or the account for greater result, is generally, Not always, but generally the account that has the higher APR. Okay. And earlier we identified that Avant personal loan has the higher APR. So Avant will be our first in line account or the account for greater results. So Avant personal loan. Okay. Now our next in line account or the account for greater liquidity. Okay. Well, let's take a look. Avant is a personal loan. Avant does not offer us liquidity at all because with Avant, income could come in, expenses cannot go up. Regions offer us liquidity. Income could come in into the regions and expenses could go up. Okay, you could make a payment to the region and you could pay bills with the regions. Okay, so regions offer liquidity. Navy Federal also offer liquidity. You could send payment to Navy Federal and you could pay bills with Navy Federal. But that would be bills, expenses that could go on a credit card. And earlier we said $2,686 of these expenses could go on a credit card. So now we have two accounts to choose from. Because remember, Avant is a personal loan, so Avant got disqualified. Okay. So between Navy Federal offers liquidity. Regions ELOC offer liquidity, but we're looking for greater liquidity. Okay, so Navy Federal is liquid up to bills that could go on a credit card plus whatever minimum payment on the Navy Federal itself. Okay, so Navy Federal is limited. Okay, but Regions ELOC, this particular Regions ELOC is not limited. So for that reason, Regions ELOC will offer us greater liquidity. They both offer liquidity, but Regions ELOC offer greater liquidity, which is what we're looking for, greater liquidity. Okay? So that would be Regions ELOC. Okay? And our third and final account for an advanced user, we're always trying to identify the alternative account for movements of income and movements of expenses. Okay, well, let's take a look. And again, on the Avant, you could have income coming in, but you cannot have expenses going out. So you could make payment to the Avant, but you cannot use Avant personal loan to pay bills with. So Avant again got disqualified. Navy Federal, you could have income comes in, expenses goes out. Regions ELOC, you could have income comes in, expenses goes out. Okay. Or deposit could come in and withdrawal could go out. So, and again, we have two accounts to choose from. America, for this alternative account for movements of income and movement of expenses, we generally look for the account that has the higher APR. Well, between those two, Navy Federal, 18%, Regions ELOC, 8%. The account between the two, the account that has the higher APR is Navy Federal, 18%. Okay, so our third and final account will be Navy Federal. Okay. All right, folks, and for an advanced user, we identified our three main accounts. Avant personal loan, the account for greater results, because when you send payment to that account, you achieve greater results in terms of reducing interest cost. Our next in line account, or the account for greater liquidity, well, Regions ELOC, very liquid. Okay? And it's not limited like Navy Federal. In Navy Federal, our third and final account, this time we look for the account with the higher APR. Okay, Navy Federal has the higher APR. Okay, all right, America. So now, which accounts we identified that you'll be Avant, Regions ELOC, and Navy. So which account, W, which account or accounts to use. So we have Avant, regions, and Navy. Next step is the H, America. How much of a payment to send to these accounts? All right, now let's try to figure out our numbers. Okay, so we have the regular payment. Okay, we have bills that could go on a credit card. All right. Or the remainder bills that could not go on a credit card, or the remainder bills in general. Okay. Cash flow. Okay. Absorption or absorption opportunity. And we have our total. All right, folks. Now, the regular payment on Avant, $1,264.43. Okay. And earlier we did say that Avant has priority over these other accounts because Avant has a significantly higher APR. Bills that could go on a credit card. Earlier we said that $2,686 of those expenses could go on a credit card. And Navy Federal is a credit card. So $2,686. Okay. The regular payment or the minimum payment on Regions E-Log, we say it's $226.94 and 64. Because remember, earlier we decoupled that payment. It's $90.94, $90.94. $26.94 goes to principal and 64 goes to interest. Okay? So $26.94 plus the Regions E-Log now, plus 64 bucks. Okay, folks? There it is, $26.94 plus 64. Okay, earlier when we were decoupling that payment. Okay. Other remainder bills, let's skip over that one for now. For Navy Federal, the regular payment or the minimum payment on the Navy Federal, $144 for principal and $214.68 when we were decoupling the payment on the Navy Federal. $144 plus $214.68. Okay. All right, folks. Cash flow, $400. Remember, America, that cash flow is better served to go to the account that has the higher APR. And earlier, we identified that Avant personal loan has the higher APR, 35.99%. And again, folks, when you send payment to the higher APR, you generally achieve greater results in terms of reducing interest cost. So this is where cash flow will go, to the higher APR account, which is Avant personal loan. Okay, Absorption or absorption opportunity. Let's leave that alone for now. Let's go back to other remainder bills. Okay. Now, single dad, his income, his net, his take-home pay is $5,400.05. So $5,400.05 minus all of these amount. We're trying to figure out the amount for on the other category. So $5,405 minus all of these amount. 126443 minus $400 minus 2694 minus 64 minus 144 minus 214 214.68 minus 2686. See, other remainder bills that could not go on a credit card or other remainder bills in general. Because remember, the credit card could not cover everything. Okay? And we're dealing with an advanced user. Okay? Advanced user uses alternative account, folks. Okay? So, $600. All right, America. Break that down just a little bit. Now, when we take a look, we have multiple payments going to lower APR accounts. Remember earlier again, we decouple the payment on these accounts. Okay? So Regions ELOC 2694 and 64, 2694 and 64. Navy Federal 144 and 214, 144 and 214. Okay? Remember, Avant personal loan has a considerably higher APR, so Avant has priority, right? So we have multiple payments going to lower APR accounts, okay? And earlier, we said to ourselves that if we have the options of sending principal payment to a low APR account, then we have the options to send principal payment to a high APR account. We much prefer, America, to send our principal payment to the high APR account, Avant. Okay. Because this location will be more efficient for us to send our principal payment. Okay. So now, again, on the regions, we have multiple payments going to the regions. Okay. 2694 plus $64, which is this 9094. Okay. 144 plus 214.68, which is 358.68. Okay. Now, because we are too close to the credit limit, we're gonna try to be less aggressive. Okay. We cannot absorb the entire amount, which is 9094 for the regions ELOC. Okay, on the regions we're $300, not taking into account the monthly payments charged. Okay. So for that reason, since we're already in the 90s, 97%, okay, we're gonna be a little less aggressive. Okay. We know we cannot send all these payments to an account that is at 8%. Okay, but we still have to be careful because we're already in the 90s, 97%. Okay. So for that reason, we're gonna have what I refer to as a partial absorption. Okay. A full absorption, remember on our method, we have a full absorption. Put it over here. A full absorption, that's when you absorb a full amount. So on the Regents E-Log, the full amount would have been 90.94. Okay. No absorptions, America. That's when you do not absorb anything. So the absorption amount is 0. Okay. A partial absorption, on the other hand, is an absorption that is between a full absorption and a no absorption. So any figure that is between 0 and 90.94. Okay. Since on the Regents E-Log we are too close to saturation point, too close to 100%, so we're going to have a partial absorption. Okay. So we're gonna at least try to take care of our interest. So we're gonna send the interest, because remember, the lender or the creditor earn the interest on you. So we're gonna send $64 to Regents E-Log. Okay, but we're going to absorb the account that has the higher APR of one personal loan, going to absorb this $26.94. That's a partial absorptions on the Regents E-Log. Which is $26.94. Because remember, the lender earned the interest on you. Okay? The principal, you have the choice to send principal payment to that lender. Okay? Now, there are times when you cannot do anything about it, and there are times when you could absolutely do something about it. Why we could do something about this payment? Because we have an additional payment going to that account, which is $600. Okay? So now we have additional payments going to a lower APR account, 8%. That's why we could do something about this principal payment. Because we have this additional payment, now we could play with the principal payment. Whether we want to keep it inside the regions or whether we want to send it somewhere else. Spirit of Father, thank you. That's exactly what we're going to do, America. We're going to absorb the principal payment portion on the Regents E-Log, which is $26.94. And again, folks, we're not going to send too much payment to an account that is at 8% when we have a 36% account on the board. Okay? So the account that offers greater results, which is a one personal loan, will absorb the principal payment portions on Regents E-Log. This is good stuff, America. So now, Avant going to absorb this $26.94. And again, folks, if we have the option, sometimes we do not, but sometimes we do. If we have the options to send principal payment to an 8% account, and we have the options to send principal payment to a 35% account, we much rather send that principal payment to the 35% account, the 35.99% account, which is a one personal loan. Okay? Now, this one is done. So now let's take a look at the Navy Federal credit card. Navy Federal, just like Regents, has multiple payments going to the Navy Federal. 144 plus 214.68. 144 plus 214.68 is that 358.68. 358.68. So these two represent the monthly payments charge, or the minimum payment on Navy Federal, plus we have an additional payment on Navy Federal, $2,686. Okay, Navy Federal America is at 18%. We do not want to send too much payment to an account that is at 18% when we have another account on the board that is at 36%. For that reason, Avant will absorb one of these amounts. But which amount will you absorb? 2686 get to take care of the bills, expenses that could go on a credit card. So now we're going to be dealing with the total minimum payment on the Navy, which is $358.68, which is comprised of $144 for principal and $214.68 for interest. Okay. And again, folks, if we have the options to send principal payment to an account that is at 18%, and we have the options to send principal payment to an account that is at 35.99%, okay, we much rather send that principal payment portion to the higher APR account, which is Avant. So the principal payment portion, 144, we're gonna at least try to pay the interest, because remember, Navy Fed will earn the interest on us, so we're gonna send them their interest to 1468. But we're gonna move the principal and send it to a place that is more efficient. Okay. That'll be this Avant personal loan. 144. You see that, America? That's why earlier we were decoupling the payment. Okay. $26.94, that's a principal payment. We'll send it to Avant personal loan. 144, that's a principal payment. We'll also send it to Avant personal loan. Okay, because at this location we achieve greater results in terms of reducing interest cost. And again, they're charging us more interest on the Avant personal loan. All right, America? The reason why now on the Navy Federal, a full absorption would have been $358.68. A no absorption would have been $0. And a partial absorption, 144. Okay. 2694, 144. 2694, 144. So we have two separate partial absorptions going to this Avant personal loan. America, we are Ambroise Method. This is revolutionary. Which debt repayment method, America? Show you how to separate principal and interest payment portions. Which debt repayment method do you know, America? Help you absorb the principal payment portion. We are the first. Nobody was teaching you about that stuff before we came onto the scene. And again, folks, we are Ambroise Method. All right, America. Now let's try to figure out our numbers. For Avant, we have 1264.48, $400, 26.94, and 144. So 1264.43 plus $400 plus 26.94 plus 1264.43, 26.94 plus 144. Okay, we are at $1,835.37. Okay. Regions ELOC, remember 2694 got absorbed by the account that offered greater results, which is Avant. So now we're only left with the interest payment portion, 64 plus 600. So 64 plus 600 looks like 664, but let's just run it. So we are at 664. Okay. And Navy Federal 144 got absorbed by Avant Personal Loan, which is the account that offers greater results in terms of reducing interest cost. So now we are left with $214.68 and $214.68 and $2,686. So $214.68 plus 2,686. So for Navy Federal, 2,968 cents. Okay. So going back to our step, which account we've already determined it's Avant, Regions, and Navy. Avant, Regions, and Navy. How much of a payment to send to these accounts? To these accounts for Avant, $1,835.37. So $1,835.37. We're doing the H now. Okay, H for how much of a payment to send to this account. Regions, $664. And Navy Federal, $2,900.68. Okay. So now our last and final step is the T, to pay down or off which debt. America, that'll be our workflow. Now let me erase some stuff from the board. Bring that a little closer. All right. Okay, America. So now our workflow. Remember, single dad gets paid on the 7th. And he gets paid on the 21st. So the paycheck on the 7th gonna cover anything between the 7th all the way to the 20th, 20. And the paycheck on the 21st gonna cover anything between the 21 all the way towards the end of the month. Okay. Remember, we have our 3 accounts, which is Avant, Regions, and Navy. Alright. Okay, so now America, this is when you have to pay attention to the due dates, especially for bills, expenses that you need cash or cash equivalent for. Okay? Earlier we said that all of these could go on a credit card, and Navy Federal is a credit card, so Navy Federal will take care of all of this. Navy, 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 Navy. Now let's pay attention to the due dates. Electricity is due on the 28th. Let's take off the first paycheck first, America. The 28th, 2-8. First paycheck, 7 to the 20th, 20. Electricity, that's after the first paycheck. We're going to take off the first paycheck first. Water on the 28th, 2-8, and again, that's after the first paycheck. YouTube on the 28th, that's way after the first paycheck. Netflix 26, again, first paycheck covers everything between the 7th all the way to 20th, 20. 26 is after 20. T-Mobile 26, and again, that's after. Groceries doesn't have a due date. I guess single dad could decide to do his grocery shopping towards the end of the month in order to give the alternative account a boost. Because remember, we're doing a scenario for an advanced user. An advanced user uses alternative account, utilize alternative account. Fuel, gas, he has to put fuel in his vehicle about once a week, and the amount is $3.80. So if we do 380 divided by 4, so we are at $95 per week, roughly. We did say that Navy will cover that item, and the Navy Federal, we have more than $95 because 380 divided by 4 is $95. Okay? Even if we do 380 divided by 4.3, we're at $88. So the highest one is 95. So let's go worst case scenario, 95. So on the Navy Federal, we have enough availability to cover the fuel for that week. Okay? So that's not going to create any problem. Restaurant dining out doesn't have a due date. So I guess single dad could wait towards the end of the month to go eat out at a restaurant in order to give the alternative account a boost. Okay? Car insurance due on the 26th. Again, 26 is after the 7th. It's after the 20th. So we're not going to have to worry about this car insurance on the first paycheck, because that's way after the first paycheck. Property tax on the 26th. And again, that's after the 7th, after the 20th. Property insurance on the 26th. Oh, I'm sorry, property insurance and the car insurance, those two combined are due on the 26th, and the amount $298. And again, that's after the 7th, after the 20th. The property insurance and the car insurance, those two insurance combined are due on the 26th. Car payment is due on the 14th for $600. And the servicer need cash or check for that car payment, because remember, the credit card could not cover this car payment. Okay? So the 14th, that's between the 7th and the 20th, because 14 is somewhere between 7 and 20th. So we have to take care of this car payment on the first paycheck. Okay? So we have to at least reserve $600 on the account that offer greater liquidity, which is Regents ELOC, because Avant cannot pay the car payment and Navy Federal cannot pay that car payment, because that particular servicer, America, wants cash or check, okay, for the car payment. Okay? So the account that offers greater liquidity, which is Regions ELOC, has to take care of the car payment. Okay. All right, folks. So this one will be Regions. Navy Federal credit card is due on the 28th, and again, that's after the 7th, after the 20th. Regions ELOC is due on the 18th. Now, 18, America, is between 7 and 20th. Okay. $90.94. Now, the 1890.94. We already have 600 going to the Regions ELOC, situational awareness, America. On the 7th, when we sent $600 to the Regions ELOC, that 600 is large enough or big enough to cover this 90.94. So on the 7th, when the direct deposit touched down the checking account, and on the same 7th, we sent the payment to the Regions ELOC, $600. This $600 is big enough to cover $90.94. So the regular payment on the Regions ELOC at that time will be satisfied. Okay? So we don't have a need to send this 90.94. It's not even going to be 90.94 because we did absorb the principal payment portion, which was 26.94, so it should only be 64. Okay? But in any event, since the payment got satisfied, okay? Since 90.94 got satisfied, okay, we're not going to worry about this 90.94 because on the 7th, okay, we'll send in from the checking account $600 to the regions, going to the regions, okay? So $600 gonna satisfy the minimum, the regular payment, $90.94, okay? So that this $90.94 gonna get taken care of already because we'll send an amount that is larger, like I aforementioned, $600. Okay. So now, Avant is due on the 26th. 26 is after the 7th. It's after the 20th. Okay. So now we do not have any issue with our due date. So which means now that the account that offers greater results in terms of reducing interest costs, which is Avant personal loan, okay, we'll get to keep the entire amount, $1,835.37. Okay. $1,835.37. Remember, I forgot to mention that single dad is on a bi-weekly pay period. Let's assume these two paychecks are equal. So $5,400.05 divided by 2. So on the first paycheck, the first paycheck will be $2,700. Let's call it 03. Let's call this one 2,700.02. Okay, assuming the two paychecks are equal. All right, folks. Now, which means now that Navy Federal will get to keep the remainder. Total, we have $2,700 that gets deposited to the checking account. So $2,703 minus 183537. 1835.37 minus $600. So Navy Federal will get to keep on the first paycheck $200 $64.66. Okay. Now, on the second paycheck, Avant needs to have total $1,835.37. Avant already received the entire amount on the first paycheck. So now Avant not going to receive anything on the second paycheck. Okay? Regions needs to have total 664. Regions only have 600 on the first paycheck. So now regions will receive the remainder, which is 64 bucks. Okay? Navy Federal needs to have total $2,900.68. Navy only received $264.66. So $2,968 minus 264.66. Okay. So Navy will receive the remainder on the second paycheck, which is $2,636.02. Okay. Alright, let me run my numbers one more time, making sure I did not make any mistake. 1835.37 plus 600 minus 264.66. Perfect. Okay. Alright, America. So that is the breakdown. Alright. Know how to allocate your paycheck. Okay. Know how much goes to these accounts per paycheck. Okay. On the first paycheck, Avant 1835.37, Region 600, Navy 264.66. Okay, folks. So to pay down wage debt, we know Navy Federal gonna pay all these. The car payment, Region's gonna take care of the car payment. Navy Federal gonna take care of its own. Region's gonna take care of its own. And Avant gonna take care of this minimum, gonna receive its own. Okay. So the way it's gonna work, on the 28th, wait on the due date. Don't pay these bills any earlier if you do not have direct deposit, automatic payment going to these accounts. Wait on the due date to make the payment. Electricity, wait on the 28th to make the payment. Water, wait on the 28th to make the payment with the Navy Federal credit card. Okay. YouTube, wait on the 28th. Netflix, wait on the due date to make that payment. T-Mobile, wait. Groceries, wait. Fuel, well, you have no choice. You have to put fuel. He has to put fuel in the vehicle once a week, so wait. Okay? So wait on the actual due date before you make the payment. Because for these alternative accounts, you do not want to charge this account any earlier than you need to. Okay? The car payment, the way it's going to work, on the 7th, the money gonna go from the checking account to Regions ELOC. Okay, so the money gonna sit inside Regions ELOC for 7 additional days, because the car payment is due on the 14th, for 7 additional days. So on the 14th, you're gonna move the money from Regions ELOC. Let me put that on the board. From Regions ELOC on the 14th now, back to the regular checking account. And from the checking account, you send the payment to the servicer, which is the car payment, whoever servicing that car payment. Okay? Again, folks, paycheck, touchdown, your checking account via direct deposit. On the 7th, okay, send the paycheck quickly to Regions ELOC, which was $600. I'm talking about the first paycheck. That $600 gonna sit inside Regions ELOC for 7 additional days, because 7 plus 7 is 14. Okay, so on the 14th, move the money from Regions ELOC back to the regular checking account, and from the regular checking account, you could either have direct deposit, automatic payment, or you can manually make the payment from the regular checking account to the servicer or whoever servicing that car payment. Okay? All right? Navy Federal credit cards due on the 28th. Navy Federal gonna receive total 2,900. 2,900 is bigger or larger than 358.68. Okay. Regions ELOC 9094. Regions ELOC receiving 664. 664 is larger or bigger than 994. Avant $1,264.43. Okay. Now, earlier we said that regions only gonna receive total 664. Okay. Not 600 plus 9094, 690.94. Okay. Remember, earlier on the region we observed the principal payment portion. All right, 26.94. So that's why it's only 664. 600 plus the $64 interest, because we're gonna at least take care of our interest. Okay. That the additional 26.94 gonna get absorbed. All right. And the way it's gonna work, okay, for those of you who might be a little confused, well, the total payment, if it's 690.94, that's 690.94. Okay. Well, folks, when you send 600, that takes care of the 90.94. That takes care of that payment. So that payment will get satisfied, okay? And you're gonna use the same 600 to pay the car payment, okay? But since we are too close to saturation point, we're still gonna send the interest payment portion, which is $64, to that account, okay? Because we're only doing a partial absorption, okay? If we had a little bit of room, we were not in the 90s, then we'll absorb the entire 90.94. So you would only be $600. Okay. But this is our worst case scenario. We're sending more because we want to cover our interest. Why? Because we're too close to 100%. So we don't want to be as aggressive as we normally are. Okay, so we're gonna send the interest payment portion in addition to whatever other payment that regions needs to take care of, which is the car payment. All right, folks. All right, America. I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. All right, my America, and going back to the absorptions, okay? That is an ingenious move, America, when you are able to decouple the payment on these other accounts and send these principal payments to a location where they will be more efficient, okay? Avant personal loan. Because Avant charging us almost 36%. Okay, we're not gonna be sending principal payment to an 18% account. We're not gonna be sending principal payment to an 8% account when we have another account on the board at 36%. Okay. Now there are times, like I aforementioned, that you cannot do anything about it. But when you could do something about it, absolutely, you need to remove this principal payment from this account and send them to better locations. Okay? And how we were able to do that, because we had additional payments going to these accounts. For the regions, we have an additional $600 going to that account, which is the car payment. For Navy Federal, we had an additional $2,686 going to the Navy Federal, which were bills, expenses that could go on a credit card. So if we have additional payments going to lower APR accounts, then we could absolutely do something about the principal payment going to those accounts. All right, America? Now, let's do a quick comparison with these other inferior debt repayment methods. And they are, of course, debt snowball group, debt avalanche group, and velocity banking group. Remember, America, when you're paying off debt, you're going to come across at least three main elements, three main assignments, three main jobs. And these elements, these assignments, these jobs are transfer, okay, alternative account, okay, and cash flow. These are the three main ones. And earlier, I've shown you guys that we could also have absorption, okay? But these are the three main ones. So let's just put absorption somewhere here. Absorption or absorption opportunity, okay? So now, we have debt snowball. Let's just put DS for debt snowball. Okay. We have debt avalanche. We have velocity banking. Okay. So we have Ambroise Method for this example, and we have Ambroise Method overall. Okay. Quick comparison, folks. You know, for debt snowball, America, the way these folks pay off debt is to send minimum payment to every other account, and the account that has the lowest balance, that's where cash flow needs to go. So these folks, they're generally taking advantage of only cash flow. So in the cash flow category, let's put a check mark, okay, for debt snowball. For debt avalanche, this group likes to attack the higher APR. The higher APR is a one personal loan, and every other account gonna receive minimum payment. The higher APR account, that's where cash flow needs to go. Okay, so just like debt snowball, debt avalanche only takes advantage of cash flow. Okay, so cash flow. Okay. Velocity banking group. You know, this group, they like to chunk. So that's a transfer. They have a debt weapon. For us, that's an alternative account. And they take advantage of cash flow. Okay. So velocity banking on this example, in this example, you know, these folks, they have some kind of fixation on ELOC, BLOC, PLOC. ELOC was already at 97%. You know, these folks, they don't even like to go in the 90s, okay? Now, there are a few of them that are trying to emulate what we are doing, Some of them now wants to go in the 90s. But in any event, they will not go as high as 97%. Okay? So they wouldn't be doing any transfer. As far as alternative account or debt weapon for them, for this example, the debt weapon would be Regents ELOC. Okay. And as far as cash flow, they're going to send cash flow to the account that offer greater liquidity, in this case Regents ELOC. And cash flow going to remain inside that account for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, until they amass enough cash flow so that later on they could execute the next chunk. So cash flow will go to Regents ELOC for them. Okay. So look at us for this example. Transfer, we transfer. Alternative account, we use alternative account. And cash flow, we also use cash flow. Okay? So they have 3 items, we have 3 items. But for transfer, these folks usually execute one transfer. For us over at Ambroise Method, we have at least 7 different ways on how we execute balance transfer. Okay. Alternative account, they're going to use a Regents ELOC as their debt weapon or debt tool, or line, or credit line, or debt destroyer. So you'll be 1, just the Regents ELOC. And as far as cash flow, the Regents ELOC will keep cash flow. But for this example, the alternative account, the debt weapon will be Regents ELOC, and cash flow, Regents ELOC will keep cash flow for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year. Okay? And again, folks, we're doing a quick comparison between them and us. Okay? Alternative account for us, sometimes we use 1, 2, 3 alternative accounts. And as far as cash flow will go to the account that has a higher APR. That's a one personal loan for us. Okay? And in our method, we have absorptions. 1, 2 over here. All right, now going back to this example, absorptions, we have 2 absorptions, 1, 2. Okay. Transfer, we did not execute any transfer. Just like they have no transfer here, we have no transfer. Okay. Let me just put none. So for this example, they did not, my competitor would not be doing any transfer because we already in the 90s and we didn't do any transfer. Alternative account, the debt weapon or debt tool will be ELOC. Our debt weapon, our so-called alternative account, we use 2. We use Navy Federal first, and we use Regents ELOC second, because these 2 are alternative accounts. Remember, you could have movements of income and movement of expenses. And again, these are the income that comes in, and at some point, 2,686 has to go out to pay these bills, okay? On the Navy Federal. On the Regents ELOC, the income comes in, and at some point, 600 has to go out to pay the car payment. So we have 2 alternative accounts. For us, it'll be Navy Federal and the ELOC. Okay. So that's 2. That's 2 total. Okay. As far as cash flow will go, our cash flow went to Avant. Okay. Cash flow for them went to ELOC. Cash flow will go to Avant for us. Okay. As far as absorptions, we have 2 absorptions. These folks, they will not have any absorption. They just will keep everything inside the ELOC for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year. Because what they're gonna do, income, the whole income gonna come in at some point, and expenses gonna go out at some point. Okay. All right. So let's take a quick look. That snowball group only takes an advantage of cash flow. This group does not go far enough, America, in eliminating debt quickly, because all they're doing is taking advantage of cash flow. Okay. Not only that, with that snowball, which account they're gonna start attacking with that 400 cash flow? They're gonna start attacking Regents ELOC, because Regents ELOC has a lower balance. 9,700 is lower than 14,400 is lower than 15,094. So that snowball, in this particular example, we have the same account as velocity banking. Okay. Now, these folks, America, will be attacking an account that is at 8%. When we have another account, 36% on the board. Okay. Let me see how many times that is. $30.599% divided by 8. Divided by 8%. That is 4.50. That's 4.5 times that interest rate. And again, 35.99% divided by 8. Folks, these folks the folks over at that snowball group, their main aim is to attack the lowest balance. Regents ELOC has the lowest balance, but that low balance account was at 8%, America. Okay. Cannot be attacking an account that is at 8% when you have a 35.99% account on the board. Another account that is 4.5 times that interest rate, which is 8% on the Regents ELOC. Again, folks, attacking lowest balance in some example is some of the silliest things you could be doing. I'm attacking the account that is at 8% in the case of that snowball because the account has a lower balance. Meanwhile, I have 36% account on the board. And these people, they like to refer to that aspect as a quick win because this account has a low balance, so which means a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times you're gonna get to zero balance a lot quicker. Okay, because you're gonna get to zero balance a lot quicker since it's at the lower balance. Okay, so they refer to it as some form of momentum, and they like to say it's a quick win. Folks, how is it a quick wins when you are going backwards? Okay, so you're saving 8%, but you're losing, let's see, 35.99 minus 8, 27.99% somewhere else. So you're saving 8, but you're losing 35.99% somewhere else. A difference of 27.99. 27.99. Folks, that is not a quick win when you're going backwards, man. That is a quick loss. And again, folks, in some examples, this could be the silliest thing. In this example, that is the silliest things you could be doing. Now, another thing they're talking about, this group, that snowball group, they're talking about, well, when you're paying up there, don't worry about the interest. Don't worry about the interest cost. So I'm losing an additional 27.99% when I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and you're telling me not to worry about the interest cost? Let me see. 35.99 minus 8%. We are 27.99% on 9,700 divided by 12 to keep our math simple, which means you'll be losing an additional 226 bucks for that in that cycle. 27.99% times 9,700 bucks divided by 12 to keep our math simple. That's 226. 226.25. Meanwhile, we're living paycheck to paycheck. You could do a lot with 226 bucks if you're living paycheck to paycheck. Okay? And not only that, if you want to attack the lowest balance account, okay, that would not even be the way to go about it. On the lesson in the past that I titled Improving Your DTI, where I've shown you guys, let me put that on the board. Improving your DTI, your debt to income ratio, which was the title, I think it was case study number 14. Where I've shown you guys, if you want to attack lowest balance account, okay, that is on a low APR, we refer to that type of scenario as event priority on our method, okay? There's a proper way to do it. Sending cash flow to the lowest balance account is not the proper way to do it, America. And on that lesson, if you guys are interested, go back and watch this lesson. Improving Your DTR was the title of the lesson. I think it was case study number 14, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, where I've shown you guys how to properly attack lowest balance account. Okay, so if you want to attack lowest balance account, that would not be the way to do it. Okay, so these folks of our Debt Snowball group, they have one job to do, which is to attack the lowest balance. They can't even do that right. Because, again, folks, sending cash flow to lowest balance, that is not the proper way to attack a lowest balance account. Okay? And on that lesson, I've shown you guys how to properly attack a lowest balance account. Okay? Well, it depends on the example, but in that example, I've gone in greater details with it. Okay? So go ahead and check that lesson. Now, that was Debt Snowball. Debt avalanche, cash flow, because these folks, they don't take advantage of transfer, they don't take advantage of the alternative account. Velocity banking, they take advantage of 3 items, okay? For us, we have absorptions, okay? Remember, we have these 2 absorptions. And in this particular example, they didn't have any transfer, we didn't have any transfer. In this example, they use 1 alternative account. Oh, I have my number in the wrong place. 1. 1. Okay. For alternative account, they have 1 debt weapon, we have 2. For E-log, they have 1, we have 1. But we have additional items, we have absorptions. They don't have these absorptions. Okay? So my point is, America, look at the list. Okay? These folks, they could be doing 3. For us, look at how many different things we could be doing. Okay? And for them, they usually do 1 transfer. On our method, we have at least 7 different ways on how we execute balance transfer. For debt weapon, they usually have 1. We could be using, depends on the example, 1 debt weapon. In this example, we're using 2, Navy Federal and E-log. Well, for us, it's alternative account, so Regions E-log and Navy Federal. That's 2. Okay? So in this example, we're using 2. So that's 1 additional item that they were using. Okay? And we have absorption, so we have 2 more items. So for this example, they have 1, 2 total. For this example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, they didn't do transfer, we didn't do transfer. They have 1 E-log, 1 debt weapon, we have 2 alternative accounts. We have Navy Federal, we have Regions E-log. They have 1 account to where that receives cash flow, we have 1 account that receives cash flow. In addition to all of that, we have absorptions, 1, 2. Okay? So 1, 2 for them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for us. Okay? In this particular example. Now, Ambroise method overall, okay? So we have transfer, 7 different ways at least we execute balance transfer. Alternative account, up to 3 alternative account. Cash flow, we use cash flow, and absorptions, we have absorption. Okay? So they have 3, these people, 1 check mark, 1 check mark, 3 check marks. For us, 4 check marks. So as far as quantity, we're having more items than they do. That's as far as quantity. We're doing more. And as far as quality, we're doing things better than they are. So we have greater quantity than our competitors, and we have better quality than our competitors. In other words, America, we outperform the competitions both quantitatively and qualitatively. That is why these other debt repayment method, America, they will never ever be able to compete with us. Okay? Because not only are we doing everything better than they are, and we're doing more than they are. Because remember, on those alternative accounts, okay, all these movement of income and movement of expenses, because remember, most of these accounts, they charge you on an average daily balance. And we're trying to reduce our average. That's why a lot of times we have all these movements on those accounts. Okay? Which is income coming in and expenses going out, like my competitor like to say. All right? That movement gonna reduce your average, which in turn, America, will reduce your overall interest cost for the cycle. Okay? So, again, we're doing more items than they are, and we're doing things better than they are. Okay? That is why these folks, they will never ever be able to compete with us. All right, America? I'll give you about 5-10 seconds to take a look at what's on the board, and then we're going to continue with the exercise. All right, America. I think that's it for me today. Again, my name is James Ambroise. I am the author, creator of Ambroise Method 1.0 and Ambroise Method 2.0. Ambroise Method is a revolutionary debt repayment method that offers greater results in terms of reducing interest cost compared to debt snowball, debt avalanche, velocity banking. Thank you, Jesus. Until next time, America. Good morning.